All right, guys, really excited to bring you all this video. Want to give you all this quick message. I looked at the YouTube stats and about over half of y'all that watch the videos are not subscribed. Please, guys, go out there. Helps the channel a ton. Just click the little red subscribe button, totally free. And remember, if you like the video, make sure you drop it a like on YouTube. Also helps a ton. Let's get into it.
That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
All right, guys, I was scheduled to upload an Alexander Madison video today. Instead, we are going to have to do that tomorrow. Be on the lookout for that because we have some massive news, and this is a time of the offseason where we really don't get much news at all. I mean, really, at the beginning of the offseason and draft season with free agency, that's when everything's happening. And now at this time, we're supposed to be seeing training camp blurbs. We're supposed to be seeing beat writers tell us how these players are being used in camp, what the coaches are seeing, what the coaches are deploying, but we're not getting that right now. Instead, we just got some bad news of DEEBO Samuel fracturing his foot, having a Jones fracture, and I've kind of seen conflicting reports on this, and what I mean by that is not conflicting reports based on his 2020 injury. That's for sure he has a Jones fracture, already had surgery for it, but I actually saw on Twitter from a couple people that this was his second Jones fracture, yet I went online and could not find any information about this ever happening before for DEEBO Samuel. So if you know the details on this, please leave a comment in the YouTube section, just because I really don't know. I don't know what to believe in at this point, just because, there are a lot of just people on Twitter who have no idea what they're talking about, and I think I'm just letting them get to me. But regardless, this is going to be a serious injury for DEEBO Samuel and his 2020 outlook, and I think we should expect him to be on the PUP, and I don't think there's any other evidence that should suggest otherwise. I mean, if you really believe DEEBO Samuel and his timetable, maybe sure he can be back by week 2, week 3, but we know how these injuries really work in the real life NFL. You can't necessarily come into a season and not be 100%. You're not going to really be able to perform where you want to, and at the same time, your risk for re-injuring it is going to go through the roof. So I expect the 49ers to be a little hesitant to rush DEEBO Samuel out there, especially considering they have a lot of talented pass catchers on this team, and this is going to be a playoff team. So I think we can expect DEEBO Samuel to be out for a significant portion of the season, maybe weeks 1 through 6. And yeah, I think that's the safest thing at this point if we were projecting DEEBO Samuel in 2020. And this has major consequences for not only 2020 fantasy value, but for dynasty value. Now, to put into context why I'm expecting DEEBO Samuel to be out a little bit longer than he would let on is because Trent Taylor suffered this same exact injury in training camp last season and actually missed the entire season. He just kept on suffering setback after setback, and I'm not going to project DEEBO Samuel to miss the entire season, but at the same time, I think it's going to be extremely optimistic to say that he's going to be out there on the field week 1 or week 2. Regardless, this is going to be the last thing I say about DEEBO Samuel. I'm going to move on to the other wide receivers on this team and George Kittle. And little sneak peek, I think George Kittle is going to destroy fantasy leagues this year. I think he's going to win titles, but we will talk about him later on in the video. Now, my closing thoughts with DEEBO Samuel is if this presents a buying opportunity for you. I've been on here in the past saying, no, don't go buy DEEBO Samuel. I didn't have DEEBO Samuel on a single dynasty league going into this week, just because everywhere I drafted him in rookie drafts last offseason, I actually just sold him high because of his prospect profile, and I didn't expect his long-term ceiling. Regardless, if you're going to be able to go out there, I don't expect this to really affect DEEBO Samuel in the second half of the 2020 season. So if you're a contender, I would go out there, buy him, even if you're a rebuilder. I mean, go out there, buy him, and then week 10, try to flip him to a contender and make a small profit. Now, let's go to who everyone is mentioning after this injury, and it's kind of the obvious guy to look towards, and that's what people like to do. They like to go to the one-to-one comparisons. They don't really like to dig deep, and they want to go to Brandon Ayuk. And yes, Brandon Ayuk looks like he's the same exact wide receiver as DEEBO Samuel, and I actually have him on a ton of dynasty leagues. He may be one of my most owned rookies, simply for the fact that he was a first-round NFL draft pick, and in dynasty leagues, in at least my Superflex rookie drafts, he's going at the very end of the second round, so I constantly find myself trading up to draft Brandon Ayuk. And I'm going to say this right now, I don't really expect this to have a significant impact on Brandon Ayuk's not only short-term value, but long-term value. And that's because we don't expect these 2020 rookies to be able to come in and make a day one impact with the shortened offseason. I mean, it's already so hard for these rookies to come in and make an impact. And the easiest thing we can project for them is for them to come on strong in the second half of the season. So while Brandon Ayuk has a good long-term outlook in the NFL, if this is going to significantly raise his dynasty value, I'm probably going to look to cash out and just make a small profit right now, because I don't think Brandon Ayuk is going to be able to come on really strong when DEEBO Samuel is out of the lineup. By the time Brandon Ayuk is developing, by the time he's comfortable at the NFL level, DEEBO Samuel is going to be coming back himself, and he's going to be facing a very similar situation to how we valued him 2 weeks from now. So if you drafted Brandon Ayuk at the end of the second round of your Superflex rookie draft, go out there, see if you can get a 2021 first round pick and take that instant profit. But I know in most leagues that is going to be hard to do. Now let's talk about the two guys that I haven't really heard anybody talk about, and these are the guys that I'm extremely excited for. I may be a little bit biased because I own them everywhere in Dynasty, but the first guy is Jalen Hurd. Now, Jalen Hurd is the forgotten man of the 2019 draft class. Y'all know the story. He went as a 5-star running back to Tennessee, was a stud at Tennessee at the running back position, yet he really did not want to play running back. I think he probably looked at how running backs got treated at the NFL level and said, hey, I want a positional change. I want to play wide receiver. And the Tennessee coaching staff was not about that. So he ended up transferring to Baylor, where he really excelled as a slot wide receiver. And this is weird considering that he is 6'5", 226 pounds. This is a body frame that we never really see play running back, and really we never see them play slot wide receiver. So Jalen Hurd, in his athletic ability, he's a unicorn. There's no other way to say it. He can play running back, he can play tight end, he can play wide receiver, and with your number one wide receiver going down in the offense, this is exactly what Kyle Shanahan is going to need. He's going to need a wide receiver that he can move around all over the field and really perform. And we see that Jalen Hurd not only has the talent for him playing wide receiver at Baylor, from him playing running back at Tennessee, and from him just coming into the college level as a 5-star prospect, but he was actually a beast in the 2019 preseason. I didn't pull up the stats here, but I encourage you, go look at Jalen Hurd preseason stats in 2019. He broke off some long plays, looked extremely explosive and extremely impressive in the limited opportunity he got. Obviously, he spent most of the year on IR for the San Francisco 49ers in 2019. But if you can go out there, if you can pick him up for a third-round pick, I think that is going to be a fantastic value, considering that he has the profile, and just a year ago, he was selected with the 3rd overall pick in the 3rd round. Now, let's go to the guy that nobody else is really talking about. And I mean, this is the first thing I thought about. I don't know if it's just because I've been drafting him everywhere. I mean, I keep on pulling late first round startup picks in all of our flock leagues, and I'm not really crying about it at all, just because I know, hey, I'm going to be able to go get George Kittle there. And I've been drafting George Kittle in almost every single dynasty draft that I participated in this offseason. I mean, this is for good reason. George Kittle is 26 years old, and let's look at what he's been able to do the past 2 seasons. In 2018, George Kittle was actually able to get 8.4 targets, 5.5 receptions, 86 receiving yards a game. I mean, these are per game statistics, and this is a player at the tight end position. This is peak level Gronk numbers. The only thing that George Kittle is missing is the touchdowns. And we know, I say it all the time, literally almost every single video, touchdowns are extremely volatile and extremely hard to predict year to year. Just because a player had 2 consecutive years with lower touchdown numbers, that doesn't mean he has any less of a chance to end up having that 10 touchdown season as a player with the same profile as him. So George Kittle was able to put up these totals and lacked the touchdown category, which really put him in the elite class of tight end, yet it didn't put him in the game-breaking class of tight end. I mean, we didn't see Jimmy Graham peak New Orleans numbers. We didn't see peak Rob Gronkowski numbers, but we saw the volume, we saw the efficiency. He was just unlucky in the touchdown category. Now we go to 2019, where he averaged 7.6 targets, 6.1 receptions, 75 yards, and again, only 5 total touchdowns. So this is a player that in consecutive years has been at the very top of the NFL in terms of both volume and efficiency, proving that he is probably the league's #1 tight end, at least in my opinion. I know PFF actually graded him out as the league's #1 tight end in the past decade, and I'm not going to say that every PFF grade is extremely accurate, but I'm going to say there's at least a process behind it, and it's just a rough gauge of what we can expect. And I think this is a confident thing to say that George Kittle is an elite tight end in terms of not only talent, but an opportunity at the NFL level. This is everything that you want to see, especially when you pair him with a head coach like Kyle Shanahan. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, in 2019, with George Kittle averaging over 6 receptions a game and over 75 yards a game at the tight end position, he actually did this while suffering a groin strain in week 6, suffering an ankle fracture in week 9, and suffering a knee sprain in week 9. So he pretty much was on the injury report from week 6 to almost the end of the season, and he was still able to put up this efficiency. He was still able to play through it and perform at a high level. So going into his prime, 26 years old in 2020, I think George Kittle was going to be the most talented tight end in the NFL, and I was still valuing Travis Kelce ahead of him in 2020 just because of the opportunity and the efficiency of the offense. But now with DEEBO Samuel gone, and with Emmanuel Sanders gone, this is going to present so much opportunity for George Kittle where they're going to be forced to run the offense through him. And a couple statistics that may be relevant for this George Kittle case to be the tight end 1 in 2020 and beyond is DEEBO Samuel in weeks 9 through 17 averaged 4.5 receptions and 70 yards a game. Now, I'm not saying that these numbers are going to directly translate over to George Kittle. I mean, it would be reckless to say that. But at the same time, if we expect DEEBO Samuel to miss this amount of time just earlier on in the season, I think we can expect some targets, some receptions, and some yards to go George Kittle's way. And I think in San Francisco in 2020, we are going to see more volume than we saw in 2019. San Francisco was able to do exactly what they wanted to in 2019, run the ball, play great defense, and win football games. But we know that that is extremely hard to do at the NFL level. We know that year to year this varies greatly. And while they may want to do this in 2020, it's hard to project them to be as low with volume as they were in 2019. I mean, they only averaged 28 pass attempts, which was 31st in the NFL in 2019, while the average was about 36 pass attempts. So if we're trying to project what we expect the San Francisco 49ers to be able to do in 2020, I say we kind of cut where they were in 2019 and the NFL average in half, where they're just a run-heavy team. They're not able to be the most run-heavy team in the NFL by any means, but they're able to run the ball and they are able to play their game style. And we look at George Kittle's targets that he received in 2019 and try to compare it to where he may be in 2020. So keep in mind, in 2019, while he was suffering from 3 major injuries, he was able to receive 27% of the team's targets. And if we just bump this up by 2%, say we look at this situation, I mean, it's extremely hard to bump this number up that much just because it's already so high to begin with. But DEEBO Samuel out for half the season. We say Emmanuel Sanders is gone. Brandon Ayuk may be slow to come on. And while I'm very excited about Jalen Hurd, it's not like we can project all of this volume going his way. So say we bump George Kittle's team targets from 27% to 29%. And we expect the San Francisco 49ers to throw 31 pass attempts a game in 2020. This would put George Kittle at 9 targets a game. And in 2019, he averaged a little over 2 fantasy points per target. And I think that we may be able to expect this to progress just because he should score more touchdowns in 2020 and he should be healthier in 2020. But we have to keep in mind that if you bump up someone's targets, it's hard to either keep that efficiency or bump it up. So what we are going to do is we are just going to keep it the same just because it's hard to maintain efficiency with the increase in volume. But anyway, this would put him at about 19 points per game in 2020. And if we compare this to how the tight ends finished in 2019, Travis Kelce was the tight end 1 in 2019, and this is over 2.5 points more per game than Travis Kelce, and this is over double than what the tight end 12 was scoring in PPR formats last season. So you're drafting George Kittle and you're expecting him to have somewhere in the ballpark of double what you expect a low-end tight end one to have, this is what I call game breaking. This is what I call league winning. And this is what I call a player that you should go out there and pay the premium to collect, and especially in tight end premium leagues. If you play in any of the flock leagues, if you play in pretty much any new league at all now, they are most likely 1.5 points per reception for the tight end position. If we look at where this would put George Kittle in 2020, this would be about 21 points per game in tight end premium leagues. And this is only wide receiver 2, only behind Michael Thomas, and this would be the running back 2, only behind Christian McCaffrey in 2019 finishes. So guys, go out there, please go buy George Kittle. Go not only buy George Kittle, go try to get Jalen Hurd thrown in at the back half of one of your other deals. And yeah, take advantage of this DEEBO Samuel opportunity opening up in the San Francisco 49ers, and don't automatically expect it to go to a rookie wide receiver that I may love, but I have to really be honest and expect him to start slower than most would expect in 2020. Have a great day, guys.